have brought you chaos at our border, failed foreign policy, sky-high prices, and out-of-control crime. It's time for new ideas and new leadership. Vote Addul Ali for U.S. House District 12, and let's make America better. Paid for by Ali for Congress. Country illegally cast a ballot. It takes the power of your vote away. Visit onlycitizens.vote to find out how you can contact your legislature and get them to pass a citizens-only voting amendment. Again, visit onlycitizens.vote and defend your right to vote.
Grace to all of you, and thank you for being with me on the Threatt Report. This wonderful Friday. The Threatt Report is an outreach of Christian Faith Center Charlotte, and as always, I communicate from the premise of seeking truth. You know, St. John 17:17, Jesus said, "Sanctify them through your truth, for your word is truth." That's my commitment, to address, discuss, examine, sift through the many issues, and prayerfully come to the conclusion that a biblical worldview is the right view. If you'd like to know more about the Threatt Report, go to our website, leonthreatt.com. If you'd like to communicate with me directly, you can go and email me at threattreport@gmail.com. With me this morning is a candidate, a dear brother that I have met a number of years ago. Addul Ali is with me this morning on the Threatt Report. Good morning, my dear friend.
Good morning, my brother. Good morning to you.
You have a very compelling story. So first of all, you're running for House of Representatives, 12th Congressional District here in North Carolina. In fact, you are the Republican nominee. I had that position or that accomplishment many years ago, and I'm encouraged that you are seeking to serve as one of our representatives. And the 12th Congressional District is in Mecklenburg County.
Yes, sir.
So first of all, tell our viewers a little bit more about you, the man. You have a wonderful story of how grace has certainly empowered you to serve in this position, this possible position for you. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the issues. So good morning, and thank you for being with me.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. The nutshell story about me, born to a teenage mom. My twin brother and I were number 2 and number 3. She was 15 going on 16 when she had us at the front of the 1980s drug epidemic. Needless to say, a household that was riddled with substance abuse and domestic violence. She had enough wherewithal to realize she couldn't take care of us. So she put us into the social service system, where I pretty much grew up separated from my twin brother for the majority of our childhood, and spent a lot of time in foster homes and group homes and detention facilities. And basically, through the grace of God, was allowed to get out of the system, go to high school and graduate, spend time in the United States Army as a field artilleryman, and moved down south, as they say. Met a country girl, a couple of kids, a dog, and a picket fence later. Here I am living the American dream. But it was through the grace of God and some very good people who instilled values in me that allowed me to kind of escape the poverty of thought, the anger and frustration that came along with the way that we grew up.
Wow, what a wonderful story. You know, for those ones who somehow trap young men and women into these boxes based on their upbringing, you were born into a setting that was unfavorable, and yet you have found yourself in a place where you have the opportunity to serve at a whole new capacity. And what an inspiring journey and story and testimony you have. So here you are, some years later, and I would consider you a great American success story, because you have truly advanced and progressed, and you refuse to let your birth process define you.
Yeah.
To all of those ones who are watching, why is it so important that we not allow how we start to define how we finish?
The great economist, the late economist Walter Williams said, that is the beauty of America, is that while you may know someone ends up successful, you cannot be quite sure about where they started. So that I think is the beauty of this country, is that this is truly one of the only places on the planet where you can come from abject poverty and dysfunction and substance abuse and have something. I give a lot of credit to a teacher I had named Miss Swannen, who was the English teacher at the alternative high school. And she made it abundantly clear that my parents' failures, the system's perceived failures, were not my problem. My problem was now I had teachers and people who would not let me fail. So for those, and my message is more to the people who saw in me something that they wanted to instill in me, is if you see something in a young person, don't be afraid to tell them that their circumstances are not who they are. You are not defined by those circumstances. As my friend Clarence Henderson would say, it's what you do in those when you have that decision to make that defines you, not the situation.
Wow. What, that's part of my story as well. I love it. Okay, let's talk a little bit about this opportunity that is set before you, the possibility of serving as a congressional representative, certainly here in Mecklenburg County, 12th District. Why are you doing this? This is, you are a Republican seeking a predominantly Democrat district. I know personally from firsthand how much of a task and hard work it really entails. Tell us, why is this so important to you?
Well, I just have to say something about this. It is for the first time in my adult lifetime where I fear that my grandchildren, should I have any, and my great-grandchildren will not experience the freedom and the opportunity that I had. That is the bottom line to it. I fear for our country. I fear for our representative republic. I look at the conditions of the 12th congressional district, and, thank you for you putting your name and time and energy on the line to run. I'm glad to be kind of following in the footsteps that you set. But that's why we're doing this, is because we cannot sit idly by and allow people who have done absolutely nothing to improve early childhood education, upward economic mobility, and prioritizing the safety of the 12th congressional district continue to hold office.
That's the motivation for so many. Okay, so why is this season of election, certainly coming between now and November, why is this season so vital to our republic and certainly to the 12th district? Why do you think that is so important?
Well, one thing is, and we have this message going on our podcast, is called voting outside the box. If there was ever a season, an election cycle, where I think it's important for us to communicate to Hispanic and Black voters that now's the opportunity to really fix some things in our community by voting outside of that monolithic Democrat box. This particular election cycle, we're talking about debt that's going to be saddled, the trillions of dollars of debt that our country is in. That is, should I have them, my great-great-grandchildren's are going to be saddled with this debt. Not only that, when we look at the condition of the 12th congressional district, we rank 50 out of 50. Charlotte is dead last for upward economic mobility in our country among major cities. Nothing's going to fix that except for conservative economic policy. We have far too many people in DC, in my opinion, that have never had to sign the back of a paycheck, that don't know what it's like to have to really deal with the economy. I've said this to folks all the time, Brother Leon. We need to be sending tow truck drivers. We need to be sending carpenters and folks who know how to fix some things and know how to, the world works up to DC. So I think that's part of the reason why this cycle, more than any other, is most important.
One of the challenges that we have seen over the years is that for whatever reason, it becomes more and more expensive, harder and harder to get the tow truck driver, to get the warehouse worker in public office who understands, as you said, signing the back of a paycheck. It becomes more and more difficult. How do we solve that dilemma, that it almost takes the millionaires to run for public office because it takes so much money? How do we shift that, and what's some of the answers that we need to see changed in that?
Well, I think the difficulty is that where we are as a federal government is so far from where the framers of the Constitution imagined we would be. We have to take serving in Congress from being a long-term career to a term-limited position. I think, and I've signed the term limits pledge I think that it starts there with term limits. And I know some of my friends, on my side of the aisle would say, no, as long as the people want you, you should be able to serve. But I do think that there's a technology gap. There's a worldview gap that come with being 80 years old in 2024 that you may just not understand. I think the other side to this is, and I'm a prime example. You can do it. We need to be encouraging people that regardless of the money in the bank, regardless of what they tell you, you can do this. There is nothing. I've yet to go somewhere that I couldn't get in, where they told me I couldn't be there. And I'm being specific on the Republican side. So we need to kind of shatter that glass ceiling of politics is outside of what I'm capable of doing. Like I said, I owned a tow truck company. That's my claim to fame. So it's doable, but I think we've got to term limits, number one. Number two, we have to look at who we're sending to DC. I no disrespect to my attorney friends, but we've got far too many lawyers in DC. That's why things are so convoluted and so bureaucratic. And I think we need to, some of the things, single issue bills, things like that. We need to make government more efficient and streamlined, and term limits, I think, will solve that problem.
So you mentioned a little bit about the deficit, and that's one of the things I wanted you to communicate. How do we end the madness of this overspending? And the House of Representatives, that's at the center of their responsibility, is manage the national debt or budget, and yet we have $30 to $40 trillion in debt, and that's just the ones that we can count. But they're said to be well over 100 trillion if you add all of the entitlements that are still outstanding. How do we deal with that?
So the first thing is we've got to rein in spending. I mean, no duh. We got to control, put tighter leash on what's going out the door. The second thing is we've got to turn off the printing press. You and I, as average Americans, don't have the, when we owe Visa some money, we just can't go print it up and hand it to Visa. So I think we need to turn off the printing press. We need to look at how we are spending our money on some of these entitlement programs. We need to be realistic about what our priorities are in relation to foreign aid. 95 something just went over to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan, while our southern border is a wreck, while fentanyl and addiction continue to plague our country. So I think we've got to rein in spending. Second part of that is we need to become more energy efficient. We need to get back to energy efficiency and becoming a net producer of energy and not an importer. You look at what's happening with our strategic oil reserve. The Biden administration doesn't want to buy the oil because it's too expensive. Well, I wonder what the cause of that was. You shouldn't have shut it down in the first place. So I think we've got to rein in spending. I think we need to look at our entitlement programs. And then ultimately, the last thing I'll say on this is we spent the last 60 years as a government subsidizing failure. Why don't we take a fresh approach at our spending when it comes to these entitlement programs? Why aren't we spending on married families, married couples, whole families? Why aren't we subsidizing those folks? We subsidize the failure. The failure continues to grow. Let's subsidize what's succeeding, and maybe the success will follow from that.
That's the next. I've never heard anyone say it so clearly, because it's been proven by a number of indicators that marriage is the number one factor to break childhood poverty. Not two people in a household working, but somehow marriage in a family has the greatest potential of breaking poverty in a family. And so to incentivize that becomes a way out of that circle and cycle of defeat. Excellent point. All right, so how do we solve the energy issue? Under Mr. Trump, we were energy independent for 4 years. We literally were an exporter of natural gas to the world. And then all of a sudden it shut down, and here we are depending on OPEC once again. How do we end that madness? November is going to be important in part because of that. How do we end the madness?
Like Trump says, drill, baby, drill. We've got to get back in the ground. But I think and this is a difficulty on the Republican side of the aisle, is whenever we engage in an environmental conversation, it's like, we're all of a sudden now tree huggers, if you will. Right. I think what we have to look at is the mixture of what we know that works and modern technology as it relates to renewable energy, solar, wind, water, hydroelectricity, nuclear, all of those kind of things. I think that's the number one thing is taking advantage of the technology and developments in technology in the energy sector. I think the other side of this is ultimately we have to, one, get our strategic oil reserve filled back up, because that puts us at great national security risk. Would be one of my biggest priorities going into DC, is making sure that we fill that strategic reserve back up. But the number one answer is drill, baby, drill. Get back to what we know we have. Get back to what we know worked under the Trump administration. And I'm interested to see, because we talk about natural gas, we talk about oil, we talk about all of these renewables and all of this energy policy. But what ends up happening is there's so much lobby money in DC from the energy sector, the renewables, the electric vehicle lobby, all of those things. And we look at that and we try to figure out how to pull some of that lobbying money out. The only other thing I'll share is I had an opportunity to go down to Mar-a-Lago, and I was talking to a guy who works for a major car dealer, and he said we're probably about 30 years away from solid battery technology for EVs. So I think we need to be realistic about our approach to the electric vehicle situation and take the next 20 to 25 years to build up that infrastructure. I think that'll also help bring some of the cost of fuel down.
Well, part of my observation and a number of indicators and articles are saying that very thing, that we're not there, and yet we're having push from the left, and particularly the Democratic Party, pushing this Green Deal upon the nations, and we're not there yet. Just the natural, what they call the earth metals to create all those batteries are just not accessible and available. And yet states like California is mandating this green energy and almost outlawing fossil fuel. It's just not there yet. And so we've got to have Congress, we've got to have common sense pushing back, says, no, let's make sure the technology is there before we have these mandates on the people.
So one thing, if you don't mind me chiming in on this real quick.
Please.
These folks are subsidizing the electrical vehicle battery mining. These rare earth metals, the lithium, the manganese, the cobalt, is being mined by people in Africa. It is hazardous. It is dangerous. There is a cost of life, a human toll that this electric. So for the folks in California that are mandating this, you are mandating the struggle, the torture, and the degradation of human beings so that you can drive around and feel good about your 25-cent avocados. Wow. Boy, I haven't heard that quite to that level, but that's a real concern. Human life is paying the price for this Green New Deal that we're being forced to comply with. Yes, sir. So excellent point. Southern border, how do we stop the madness? And I know that part of the goal is to push toward November, but what do we do until then? There is a human tragedy taking place on the southern border. What do we need to do now? All right. The president has the power to close the border. Stop it. Now, this is going to be controversial. We're on Rumble, so folks might understand this. Y'all better be thankful that I'm not in charge of the border, because I'm going to tell you why. Pastor, they have something called less than lethal. These little rubber bullets and these beanbag things, okay? Yes. Where there's not a wall, like we saw a couple of weeks ago where these migrants were pushing back against the Texas National Guard. If it were me, everybody would have got a rubber bullet. You about to stop right there. Right. We need to take seriously the fact that it is not women and children en masse coming to our country. It is military age men. Why? I don't want to sound conspiracy theorist here, but that sounds like a takeover. It sounds like people are dumping out their jails in Central and South America. It sounds like China is sending people, because we talk about Chinese nationals. We're talking about areas, we just saw this morning a report about African migrants shutting down a soccer game in New York City because they wanted to use the field over the actual citizens. So if it were me, number one, and unless I see you with an actual, firearm, you would go to that line and no further. There's a port of entry where if you want to come in our country, you take your narrow tail down there and you do it the right way. But I think we've got to have a president. Under Trump, we had the lowest illegal immigration for eons. And I think we need to get back to taking our country's border seriously. The last thing I'll say about this is we don't have a country if we don't have three things: a language, a culture, and a border. So if you take those three things away, the sovereignty of a nation disappears. A language, a culture, and a border. We're allowing people to come in our country and not learn the language. We're allowing people to come into our country and not adapt to what the word is, assimilate to our culture. You know, the beauty of our nation is that we are a melting pot, right? Like Taco Tuesday, what's more American than Taco Tuesday, right? So I think we've got to shut it down. I think we pause, we process the cases for asylum that we have, and then we really take a hard, fast look at a safe first country policy, which is a no-brainer to me.
You know, those are common sense issues. I know that my good friend E.W. Jackson, who was running for president early in the presidential Republican pursuit, that was one of his postures, to close the border for a period to validate and verify who's coming into this country. And I think that's common sense. And so we've got to have the courage to do what's right. This is not about racial profiling and racial oppression to those from Latin America. This is about securing a nation's future by knowing who's coming into the country. That's common sense. And so we've got to have elected officials with the courage. Now, here's one of my things on this. I know the president, we're waiting on the president, but I also believe that Congress has a responsibility. When the president fails to do his job, and we have this madness and this genocide to some degree taking place at the southern border, then Congress must step in and say, no, we will secure the border. And because we have three branches of government, we have the Congress, we have the courts, the Supreme Court, and we have the executive branch. And if one of them fails, the other two must step in. And so we've got to have leaders who have the courage to do what's right to secure our border. So any more take on that? If not, then let's talk about the presidency. Two things I want you to mention, and we'll give you a perspective on it. Okay. And I think I have about 7 or 8 more minutes. But listen, I want you to talk about the presidency. Mr. Trump is the Republican nominee, and Mark Robinson is the Republican nominee for governor in North Carolina. Give me your take on both. Mr. Trump first.
I'm all in for Trump. I support President Trump. Not that he needs it, but he's got my full support and endorsement. I think more than ever before, we need somebody like him back in office. I know there's some never Trumpers out there. I know people don't like his demeanor. Some of his comments could be off color, but I think that's what we need in our country right now. We don't need a panderer in chief. We need a commander in chief, somebody that's actually going to do the job. I dare say, and I could, you and I both know all the talking points about how well the economy was doing, how peaceful the world was, because they knew Trump wasn't going to play those games. So I think we've got to get back to that. I also think that it's a crying shame that the Department of Justice has been weaponized. What Alvin Bragg and the New York DA, Attorney General, and what's happening down in Georgia is an absolute crying shame. I think you're going to see more Black men supporting President Trump this cycle than we've ever seen before. I think Mark Robinson is going to win the governorship. And I'll tell you one thing I've noticed about this is that whenever you see a candidate with 95 to 97% negative press, that tells me the left is absolutely scared of a Black American who loves this country, loves the state of North Carolina, is not going to budge on principle. There's a lot of criticism about Mark and, kind of the job he's done as lieutenant governor and his ability to govern as governor. But one thing that I noticed is that he is willing to learn. He's willing to surround himself with some of the smartest people and to really do the job of governor. You've got to be an effective listener. You've got to know how to manage teams. And I think he has that down pat. The sad thing about this ultimately is that if Mark Robinson was a Democrat, he would be so well known in Black communities. He would be so welcomed across the state. Roy Cooper would have had him at the governor's house for dinner every night. But it is a shame to see that our country, somebody who represents what the success of this country can be, what the American dream is treated the way that he's treated. He is all but ignored by the same folks who screamed, the first Black this, the first Black guy with a cotton gin, the first Black. It is a shame to see how they ignore him. But I fully support Mark Robinson for governor. I'm behind him 1,000%. As a matter of fact, I'll be with him in a couple of days. And, I think that we're going to see something unheard of in North Carolina politics. I'm gearing up to see Mark Robinson become our next governor.
Wow. We certainly have been doing everything we can on this end to keep talking about it, keep pushing it forward, because I think North Carolina has got to continue to press forward with our economy, with certainly the defending of life and other important legislation. We have a supermajority, but we need the governor's seat to help maintain some of the good progress that we've made in the last several years. All right. Now, we have just several minutes. Tell us a little bit more about your campaign. How do people reach you? I've got still 101 questions, but we're getting close to time. I want to make sure you get your information in. How can people get there and help your campaign? How can they reach you? How can they donate to your campaign? And what are some of the other issues that really matter to you as a newly elected representative here in the 12th district?
So first things first, thank you for the opportunity to be on your show. People can support our campaign by going to Ali for Congress, ALIFOR Congress.com. There you can find out my stance on the issues. You can also contribute to the campaign. We are focusing on the 3 issues that are important to the people of the 12th Congressional District. We've done some polling, and this is across party lines. We need to be improving early childhood education. One of my first goals in becoming a new congressman would be to introduce legislation that would attach a literacy requirement to any daycare receiving federal funds. So that's K through kindergarten, early childhood education programs would have to have a literacy requirement. Second thing we're focusing on is upward economic mobility. I mentioned earlier about where we are in relation to upward economic mobility in the 12th Congressional District. One of the other aspects of that is skills training. We want to get people connected to the jobs that matter. I already have proposed legislation that I'm calling the MATE Act, M-A-I-T, which means More Americans in Technology. When you look at Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, some of our government agencies that are very big employers, most of those jobs in the technology sector are filled by people who aren't from this country. They're from India and Pakistan. Wow. So why aren't we training our folks to take those jobs? And then last but certainly not least is prioritizing community safety. Now, there's a federal side of that. We talked about the border, but as a congressman, we have the power, the ability to advocate and support local law enforcement and to be there to basically support local law enforcement. The other side of that, prioritizing community safety, is I want to be able as a congressman to go to some of these young men who are deciding to get engaged in crime and say, look, I come from where you come from. I come from that same hurt. I come from that same pain. I come from that same dysfunction. You can choose to do something different. And as a congressman, I think the gravitas that comes with that seat will allow me to be a strong advocate and to prioritize our community safety. So AliForCongress.com is how you can support. We need your prayers. We need the 3 T's, your time, your talent, your treasure. And we really appreciate all the support we've been getting so far.
Awesome. Addul Ali, thank you for being with me on the Threatt Report. We've run out of time. And to all of you who are with us on the Threatt Report, we'll be back again next week addressing important issues from a biblical worldview. Have a great day. Bye-bye.